Hi everyone, welcome to the second video for Module 11. We're going to begin by working with the Fabric Sold by Store worksheet under the NPEX1611A file. So we're going to begin with step 5, and what we're going to do is create a query and load data from an Access database, and that will display information about the fabrics purchased from Fabric Station stores. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create the new query that's going to import a file that you should have retrieved already from the SAM website. So to do so, we're going to select Data up on the ribbon, and we're going to Get Data from Database and select Microsoft Access Database. And then you want to select the file that you downloaded from the SAM website, Support NPEX1611A Fabric. Click on that once and select Import. And what that's going to do is it's connecting to this file is connecting to the database. The Navigator dialog box will appear, and here you can see the file name, and these are the worksheets within that file. So we want to preview the 2018-2019 orders, so simply select that by clicking on it once, and now we have the preview area. So we want to load this information, so we're going to come down to the bottom of the Navigator dialog, click the drop down arrow next to load, and we want to load to. And what we want to do when we see the import data dialog box, we want to only create a connection and add this data to the data model should be checked. And then you're going to click OK. So to the right of the screen, you can now see the connection that is currently loading up with the queries that you have. Okay, so now that we've made that connection, we want to next create a pivot table using that data from the Access database. So we're going to begin by selecting cell A3. We're going to come up to the ribbon, click Insert, and then Pivot Table. And we want to make sure that we select Use an External Data Source on the Create Pivot Table dialog box. We're going to choose the connection, and we want to move over to the Tables tab on the existing connections and select the 2018-2019 orders. Click Open and then OK. So now you can see that we're set up to begin creating a pivot table. So what we want to do first is we want to put the item quantity field into the values box. So I'm simply clicking and dragging. Category field we want in the rows area, and the store city we want in the column data. So now we're going to make a couple of changes to make the data a little bit easier for us to read. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a custom name for sum of item quantity that you see in cell A3. So since we're in the pivot table, you can see that up on your ribbon bar, a pivot table tools tab has appeared with two sub-tabs, Analyze and Design. You want to make sure that you're on Analyze. Come over to the left and select Field Settings for the active field, which is A3. And we want to create a custom name labeled Items Sold. Sorry about that. Items Sold, and then click OK, and you can see that it has now, the name field has been changed. The next thing that we want to do is you want to select cells B5 through G11, and we want to change the formatting to be a number with no decimal places and 1,000 separator. So if I come up to the ribbon bar, click on Home. In the number area, on the drop down, click Number, and then using the quick steps, you can add the comma to indicate the 1,000 separator. And on the decrease decimal, you want to click that twice so that no decimal points appear. So for step 7, what we want to do is insert a time slicer that will show the items that were sold in January of 2019. So to insert a timeline slicer, you want to be on the Insert tab on the ribbon and select Timeline. The Insert Timelines will appear, dialog box will appear. You want to click Order Date and click OK. Now we want to move the dialog box over to A12 through G21. So as I get the 4-pointed pointer, I can click and drag just as you can do with any other chart or table that you create. So by clicking and dragging, I'm going to move this over to A12, and then I'm going to use the handle to move it over to G21 according to the instructions. And finally, for step 7, what I want to do is I want to make sure that January appears. And I can do that by simply clicking on the arrow to the left so that you can now see January. Next, we're going to start with step 8. And to begin working on this step, we're going to select Fabric Sold by Date Worksheet tab. And we're going to begin by creating a pivot table beginning in cell A3. So you want to make sure that your mouse cursor is in cell A3. So we want to go back up to the ribbon bar, make sure that Insert is selected. Pivot table. You can see here that it says use this workbook's data model. And we want to place it in the existing worksheet. So we're simply going to click OK. So once again, we're ready to add information to the pivot table. So here are the pivot table fields that are available. If I click this arrow, it'll show everything that I can insert into the columns, rows, and values or filters. So first we want to put the order date in the rows area. So I'm clicking and dragging that down. And notice once I've done that, several fields appear. Next, we want to take item quantity, and we want that to be in the value field, and category to be in the column field. So now we're going to move on to step 9. And we are going to create hierarchies for the order dates and product categories so it is easier to find information for a specific fabric that is on sale on any day. So we want to go to the power pivot on the ribbon, and we want to select Manage. Once you select Manage, the Power Pivot for Excel dialog will appear. So to get through this exercise, you want to make sure that Diagram View is selected. So to begin creating the first hierarchy, which we're going to call Date, if you look at the selection here that you have available to you, notice that there are 2 buttons to the right. First is Create Hierarchy, and the second is to maximize. So we're going to select Create Hierarchy, and notice this new area appears, and we want to name this date. So now that I've created that hierarchy, now I can simply drag the columns that I want to appear underneath the date hierarchy. So the first thing that we want to appear is the order date year. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to click and drag that until it captures date. Next, we're going to do the same thing for order date quarter. And then finally, order date month. And one final item that we want to add, the order date, which is all the way up at the top. So select that, highlight it, and click and drag it down until it reaches the new hierarchy that we've just created, date. And now you can see that that hierarchy has been created. Now we want to create another hierarchy, so we're going to select the Create Hierarchy button, and we're going to name that Product. And again, we're going to add some of the columns under this hierarchy, and we're going to add category and subcategory fields. So up at the top, we have category. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to click and drag that down to the new hierarchy, Product. And then we're going to take subcategory and do the same. And make sure that to put it into the product hierarchy that it's highlighted in blue, and then release your mouse. And then we want to close that out. Now what we want to do is we want to revise this pivot table based on the new information that we've just added. So we want to remove the fields from the columns and row boxes. So under columns, I'm going to click and drag category back up, and on the rows, I'm going to click and drag these items back up into the field area so that all I'm left with is the sum of quantity field. So what we want to do is we want to format. So before we begin formatting, we want to add the date hierarchy to the rows box. So if you click date, that's been added to the rows. And if you select product, you can click and drag that into columns. So now you can see I have 2018 and I have the different materials. So we want to format this similar to what we did on the Fabric Sold by Store. And the first thing that we want to do is come over to, now we want to format this similar to what we did on Fabric Sold by Store. So select cell A3, and the pivot table tools will show up on your ribbon. And you want to make sure that you are on the Analyze tab, Active Field, Field Settings, and we want to create a custom name that reads Items Sold. Click OK. You can see that that's been changed. And we want to format cells B5 through H7. You come up to the Home tab, select Number with a comma, and decrease the decimals by 2. And finally, by selecting these buttons here on these check buttons, plus buttons on the side, we can drill down so that we can see the sales for January of 2019 only. So I'm going to click on 2019. January is a part of Q1, so I'm going to click on Q1, and then I'm going to click on January. And this gives me a summary of everything that has been sold every item that's been sold according to the fabric. And that summarizes the Module 11 video. Good luck, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.